diplomatic selection. I know that you are legitimately concerned about the historic events currently underway that are shaking up the world order. The war in Ukraine, which has resulted in nearly 1 million deaths and injuries, continues unabated. The United States of America, our ally, have changed. Their position on this war are less supportive of Ukraine and are casting doubt on what will happen next. At the same time, the same United States intends to impose tariffs on products from Europe. Finally, the world continues to grow ever more brutal, and the threat of terrorism continues unabated. All in all, our prosperity and security have become more uncertain. And it has to be said, we are entering a new era. The war in Ukraine has now been going on for over 3 years. From day one, we decided to support Ukraine and to sanction Russia. And we were right to do so, for it is not only the Ukrainian people who are courageously fighting for their freedom, but it's also our security threatened. Indeed, if one country can invade its neighbor in Europe with impunity, then no one can be sure of anything. And peace can no longer be guaranteed on our own continent. History has taught us this. Beyond Ukraine, the Russian threat is here, affecting the countries of Europe. It affects us. Russia has already turned the Ukrainian conflict into a global one. It has mobilized North Korean soldiers and Iranian equipment on our continent, while helping these countries to further arm themselves. President Putin's Russia violates our borders to assassinate opponents, manipulates elections in Romania and Moldavia, and organizes digital attacks against our hospitals to block their operation. Russia tries to manipulate our opinions with lies spread on social networks and basically tests our limits, doing so in the air, at sea, in space, and behind our screens. This aggression seems to know no borders, while Russia continues to rearm, spending more than 40% of its budget to this end. By the end of the year, it plans to increase its army still further with 300,000 more soldiers, 3,000 more tanks, and 300 more fighter planes. Who can believe it? In this context, that today's Russia will stop at Ukraine? Russia has become, as I speak and for years to come, a threat to France and Europe. I deeply regret this, and I am convinced that in the long term, there will be peace on our continent with Russia once again at peace. But this is the situation I'm describing to you, and we have to live with it. Faced with this world of danger, it would be foolish to remain a spectator. Without further delay, to make decisions for Ukraine, for the safety of the French, for the safety of Europeans, for Ukraine first. All the initiatives that are helping to bring about peace are a step in the right direction, and I would like to pay tribute to them this evening. We must continue to help the Ukrainians resist until they can negotiate with Russia a solid peace for themselves and for us all. That's why the road to peace can't involve abandoning Ukraine. Quite the contrary. Peace cannot be achieved at any price and under the Russian dictator. Peace cannot be Ukraine's capitulation. It cannot be its collapse. Nor can it mean a fragile ceasefire. And why not? Because here too we have the experience of the past. We cannot forget that Russia began invading Ukraine at the end of the year of Russia's war, and that we then negotiated a ceasefire in Minsk. And the same Russia did not respect that ceasefire. And we have not been able to maintain the balance for lack of solid guarantees. Today, we can no longer take Russia at its word. Ukraine has a right to peace and security for itself. And it's in our interest, in the interest of the security of the European continent. That's why we're working with our British and German friends and several other European countries. That's why over the past few weeks you've seen me a few days ago in London to consolidate the commitments that are necessary for Ukraine. Once peace has been signed, so that Ukraine is not invaded again by Russia, and we need to prepare for it. This will undoubtedly involve long-term support for the Ukrainian army. It may also involve the deployment of European forces. They wouldn't go and fight today. They wouldn't go and fight on the front line, but they would be there once the peace is signed to ensure that it is fully respected. As early as next week, we will be bringing together in Paris the chiefs of staff of those countries who wish to assume their responsibilities in this respect. In this way, a plan for a solid, lasting, and verifiable peace that we have prepared with the Ukrainians and several other European partners, which I defended in the United States a fortnight ago and across Europe. And I want to believe that the United States will stand by us. But we have to be ready, should this not be the case, whether peace in Ukraine is achieved quickly or not, the European states, the Russian threat I have just described, be able to defend themselves more effectively and deter further aggression. Yes, whatever happens, we need to equip ourselves better to raise our defense posture for the sake of peace itself and to act as a deterrent. In this respect, we remain committed to NATO and our partnership with the United States of America, but we need to do more to strengthen our independence in terms of defense and security. Europe's future should not be decided in Washington or Moscow. And yes, the threat is returning in the East. And the innocence, as it were, of the last 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall, but is now over. In Brussels tomorrow, at the extraordinary council meeting of the 27 heads of state and government, with the Commission and the President of the Council, we will be taking decisive steps forward. Several decisions will be taken that France has been proposing for several years. Member states will be able to increase their military spending without this being taken into account in their deficit. Massive joint financing will be agreed for the purchase and production on European soil of ammunition, tanks, weapons, and the most innovative equipment. I have asked the government to mobilize all its resources to strengthen our armed forces as quickly as possible and to speed up the reindustrialization of all our regions. And I will be bringing together with the relevant ministers in the next few days European defense, which we have been advocating for 8 years, is becoming a reality. This means that European countries are more ready to defend and protect themselves, producing together the equipment they need on their own soil, who are ready to cooperate more, to reduce their dependence on the rest of the world. And that's a good thing. Germany, Poland, Denmark, the Baltic states and many of our partners have announced unprecedented efforts in terms of military spending. So in this time of action, which is finally beginning, France has a special status. We have the most efficient army in Europe, and thanks to the choices made by our elders after the Second World War, we have nuclear deterrent capabilities. These protect us far more than many of our neighbors. And what's more, we didn't wait for the invasion of Ukraine to take stock of a worrying world. And through the 2 military programming laws that I have decided on and that successive parliaments have voted for, we will have doubled the budget for our armed forces in almost 10 years. But given the evolution of threats and the acceleration I've just described, we will have to make new budgetary choices on additional investments that have now become indispensable. I have asked the government to work on this as quickly as possible. But these new investments will require the mobilization of private funding, but also public funding, without raising taxes. This will require reforms, choices, courage. Our nuclear deterrent protects us. It is complete sovereign, French from start to finish. It has always played an explicit role in preserving peace and security in Europe. But in response to the historic appeal of the future German Chancellor, I have decided to open the strategic debate on the protection of our allies on the European continent by our deterrent, of our allies on the European continent. Whatever happens, the decision has always been and will remain in the hands of the President of the Republic, head of the armed forces. Controlling our destiny, becoming more independent, We must work towards this, not only militarily, but also economically. Economically. Yes, economic, technological, industrial, and financial independence are essential. We also need to be prepared for the United States and to impose tariffs on European goods, as they have just confirmed against Canada and Mexico. This decision is incomprehensible, both for the American economy and for ours. Will have consequences for some of our industries. It adds to the difficulty of the moment, but it will not go unanswered. So while we prepare to fight back with our European colleagues, we will continue, as I did a fortnight ago, to make every effort to convince that this decision would hurt us all. And I hope we will. Yes, to convince and dissuade the President of the United States of America. All in all, these are times that call for decisions unprecedented in decades. On our agriculture, our research, our industry, on all our public policies, we can't have the same debates as in the past. This is why I have asked the Prime Minister and his government, and I invite all the country's political, economic, and trade union forces on their side to make proposals in light of this new context. Tomorrow's solutions, it cannot be yesterday's habits. My dear compatriots, in the face of these challenges and irreversible changes, we must not give in to any excess, neither the excesses of the warmongers nor the excesses of the defeatists. France will follow only one course, that of the will for peace and freedom, true to its history and its principles. Yes, that's what we believe in for our security, but it's also what we believe in to defend democracy, a certain idea of truth, a certain idea of free inquiry, the respect in our societies, a certain idea of freedom of expression, a certain idea of freedom of expression that does not mean the return of hate speech, a certain idea of humanism. This is what we stand for and what is at stake. Our Europe has the economic strength, the power, and the talent to rise to the occasion. And we have the means to compete with the United States of America, let alone Russia. So we must act united as Europeans and determined to protect ourselves. And that's why our country needs you and your commitment. Political decisions, military equipment, and budgets are one thing, but they can never replace the fortitude of a nation. Our generation will never again see the dividends of peace. It's up to us that our children reap tomorrow the dividends of our commitments. Then we'll face it together. Long live the Republic. Vive la France.